After working hard at the gym, you need a mattress that works as hard as you do. Spinalign has engineered the perfect mattress for you and your active lifestyle. Don't compromise your recovery with inferior sleep. Order your Spinalign mattress today. After working hard at the gym, you need a mattress that works as hard as you do. Spinalign has engineered the perfect mattress for you and your active lifestyle. Don't compromise your recovery with inferior sleep. Order your Spinalign mattress today.
Rush Vapes, the world's first pre-workout vape.
I'm Dave Palumbo, founder of Species Nutrition. I created Species Nutrition with one mission in mind: to provide bodybuilders and serious athletes with no-nonsense supplements that work and are backed by science. From my earliest bodybuilding days, I believed in only putting the best in my body, and that lives on in the Species Nutrition line of products. We use only top-of-the-line formulations dosed for maximum results and the best flavoring systems available. I put my name and reputation on every bottle of Species Nutrition products. If you want to be your absolute best, join the evolution.
RX Television on RxMuscle.com. This is Ask Dave, better known as hashtag Ask Dave, your 30-minute question and answer show with Dave Palumbo. All your questions, diet, training, supplementation, everything going on in and around the bodybuilding world. As we now bring in Dave Palumbo. Of course, Dave, the big news that still has reverberations into this week and are going to have reverberations, permutations, whatever you want to call it, going all the way into December, and that is 7-time Mr. Olympia Phil Heath committing to do the Olympia, making the big shock announcement last Friday.
Yeah, I mean, we all speculated that, this would be really a good move for Phil. I didn't know where his head was at. I mean, but let's face it. I mean, during these COVID times, no one's doing great in business. Maybe Jay Cutler, but no one else is doing great. So I can't imagine Phil's killing it. He can't really do that many appearances. And so a $400 payday, and winning your 8th Sandow can certainly put your stock through the roof. I mean, plus he's also now, Danny Garcia is his manager now, and The Rock and Danny just bought the XFL Football League, and they're planning The Rock, what are those games called? They're calling them the whatever the games that they're doing are. Athleticon, excuse me, is going to be next year now. So, Phil's got a good team behind him there, and they're willing to promote him. So I guess, winning another Olympia would certainly, raise his stock through the roof. And like I said, when you take a year off sometimes and you disappear, people forget. It seems like now Phil's like the savior coming back to save bodybuilding. And so he's got a better, I guess, fan base behind him now, as opposed to people were they wanted to see him lose when he was the 7-time champ. Now that he's coming back, it's like almost like people want to see if he can win 8,
That's the fickle nature when it comes to greatness, right? I mean, you have someone who won the Olympia 7 times, and you could very well argue that he, in many ways, transformed into having that villain role, right? We talked about this when I interviewed Phil earlier this year or last year at the Dubai Muscle Show, and he talked about the comparison between him and LeBron James, and assuming that villainous role, right? Fans are rooting for you to fail, but now, all of a sudden he finds himself in a position where fans are rooting for him to do well. And of course, all that's at stake is that he has a chance to tie Haney and Coleman with 8 Mr. Olympia titles. That's something I just wanted to get a quick thought on you, because that is something that we talked about last year. How important was that to Phil to come back and see if he could tie and get onto that Mount Rushmore?
I know Phil would say, oh, it doesn't matter, I have 7 wins already. But let's face it, Phil's a very competitive guy. There's no way he doesn't want to. I don't think he's not even thinking 8. I think he wants 9. He wants to be the king of the roost so that people won't say, well, he's just as good as. No, they want to say he was the best Mr. Olympia with the most wins. And, if he wins this year, there's no way he's not coming back at the next year as the reigning champion. So he could win 10 times, we don't know. I mean, we don't know what's going to happen these next couple of years. So if he can get back on top and his body looks good and he's healthy, there's no reason why he can't win a couple more times. This year, we don't even know who's going to show up this year, basically. And obviously, if he lost this year, it would be a huge blow to him. But I don't think he could, I don't think it could be I don't think him coming back has any negative connotations except to his ego if he doesn't win. But it's only good for business, for him and for the Olympia. And then if somehow Sean Roden settles his case before that and we see a rematch between those guys, that's going to be, that's going to be, grounds for one of the best Olympias.
Well, let's not also forget, waiting in the wings, the defending Mr. Olympia champion, Brandon Curry. I'm sure he's going to have something heavy to say on December. So we're going to start on that as we go to the first 2 questions, of course, from the Dave Palumbo Experience app. The first question, Dave, you and Chris, both on Heavy Muscle Radio, said that you don't think Phil Heath's midsection can or will improve for the 2020 Olympia. The question is, why do you say that? Critics of Roelly Winklaar previously labeled him as a bubble gut, and now people often refer to him as someone who is living proof that you can reverse a bubble gut. Are you assuming the reason Phil has distension is different than the reason that Roelly did?
I don't think that Phil's main problem is the distension, because you can control. That could be just a fiber supplement will fix the distension and controlling himself on stage. He's got a lot of muscle on a small, not necessarily a big frame. He's cartoonish, but he doesn't have super wide clavicles. And so, his waist has gotten thicker over the years as the rest of him has gotten bigger. The problem is he doesn't have a large space to spread it out on, like I say, a Jay Cutler or a Roelly Winklaar. Roelly is super wide bone structure wise. Phil is not. He's just round, So he's going to have a tougher time with that, I think, especially on the standing relaxed pose and stuff like that. But it doesn't matter because he really almost beat everyone, even with the problems he was having. So I don't see anyone better than that Olympia. Roden would be the only guy to give him a run for his money. And Roden's, a couple of years older now too. So, and we don't even know if Roden will be in the show. So I just don't think that anyone's that close to Phil. Roden just happened to be right next, right there with him, waiting for Phil to kind of just not show up at his best. And that's why Roden won. But Roden didn't win by a mile. So I don't think that Phil has to be that much better. He just has to maybe work on controlling the midsection, using a good fiber supplement, keep everything flat when he's on stage so that, no one can complain about that. But he doesn't have any weaknesses. He doesn't have any torn body parts. So to me, he's an easy win if he shows up at his best.
Second question, again, from the Dave Palumbo Experience app. Dave, I'm always hungry, even when not dieting and have low leptin levels. Is there any way to increase this? So increases leptin levels.
Yeah. Well, the problem is that having high leptin doesn't mean you're going to have less appetite, even though leptin is the hormone that reduces appetite. They've actually found in studies that obese people have the highest amount of leptin in their body, which doesn't make sense because why are they always hungry and eating? Well, because their sensitivity to leptin is low. In other words, their receptors for leptin are not there. So they have all this leptin hormone and the body keeps releasing more and yet it's not working. So the key is to increase leptin sensitivity and receptors so that your body can respond to your leptin. Actually, the lipolyzed fat burner that I sell from Species Nutrition has one of the ingredients it's a leptin sensitizer. And that's why a lot of people like it because it kills your appetite. And it doesn't really kill your appetite. What it does is it restores it to normal because it enables you to react and respond to the leptin that your body's releasing. And that's important. I think a lot of people don't realize that, leptin is not the answer. It's the leptin receptivity that's important in the body. Same thing with insulin. You can have enough insulin in your body, but you still can have high blood sugars because you just don't have enough insulin receptors. So your receptivity is low. And that's the important thing.
Let's go to our Instagram questions. Again, if you're not following us on Instagram, our handle is official_RxMuscle. And again, if you're watching us for the first time. Let me mention
one thing, because a lot of people ask me, how can they submit questions? What's the best way? Explain to people the best way to submit questions and when they should submit.
So every Wednesday, generally, we record the show on Wednesdays. In the morning, we post basically the post that says, Ask Dave, that we're filming today. That's where you have your chance to ask a question. That's 95% of it. So, I mean, if you want to just DM us a question, if it's during the course of the week, go right ahead and we can put that on the pile as well. But those are the two ways that we take questions for this show. And again, if you're not already following us, subscribe to us on YouTube. Hit the subscribe button below. Hit the notification bell. You're not going to miss any of our upcoming shows, segments. A lot, obviously, to talk about now. Phil coming back. Who knows who could be next? So, we're going to have reaction videos galore and all sorts of fun leading all the way between now and December.
Especially the sales we advertise, Sid. If you don't subscribe to the channel, you don't get the notification, you're going to miss the sale. And a lot of these sales, we're sold out in an hour or two after, if we do a species nutrition-like sale where I have some short-dated product or stuff like that. So if you want to know when we're doing all this stuff, you got to get notified. The only way you can do that is subscribe to the channel and turn on your notifications.
And again, if you like what you're watching, hit the thumbs up button, comment below. Obviously, that helps us immensely. And as always, we appreciate all the support of our Nation. Let's go to the question. First question from Big Daddy Jenks. What is the best course of action to fight metabolic burnout in the final weeks of contest prep?
What I do a lot of times with a lot of the people I'm working with, and it's hard to do this yourself, because you don't want to let off the gas because you think, well, I got the show coming up. Sometimes I'll just tell, especially even with women, because I work the women pretty hard because they have trouble getting lean. A lot of ladies, because their metabolisms are just by nature not as good as men's, and they're not using as much drugs or any drugs. So what I'll do is, if I see they're really starting to burn out and they're not responding, and I'm upping cardio, lowering food, they're not losing weight, and I know they're not cheating, I'll give them a couple days. I'll give them a day off. I'm like, all right, no cardio the next 2 days. They'll be like, what? I mean, you have me doing over 2 hours of cardio. I said, no cardio. And what that does is it restores their body, gives their bodies a chance to kind of rest a little bit more, recover, and it tricks the body into thinking, oh, everything's fine. We're not overworking. Cortisol levels drop a little bit, and then things start to respond. I'll even feed them on those days, which it freaks them out even more. Wait, I'm not going to do any cardio, and you're going to give me carbs? I absolutely am. And you know what a lot of times happens? Nothing. They don't gain any weight or lose any weight. Sometimes they lose. It's just because their body's been overworked. So if you're feeling like you're burnt out, and don't use it as an excuse to be lazy, but if you're legitimately not responding to your body anymore and you're just lowering stuff and upping cardio and it's still not doing anything, take 2 days off from cardio. You can still do your weights, but take your cardio off, take a full day off from everything, maybe sleep, an extra hour or two that day. And you might have to do like a clean carb, 1 or 2 days in a row. If you're 4 or 6 weeks out, it's not going to set you back. Believe me, it'll recharge the batteries.
Let's go to Lazaros Pavlidis. Is INCRELEX the same as IGF-LR3 or a peptide form of IGF? Do you recommend a peptide form of IGF, or am I better off with GH insulin and of course AAS?
All protein or peptide, same word, okay, hormones, from insulin to thyroid to IGF-1 to growth hormone, these are peptide hormones. You can call them peptides, you can call them polypeptide hormones, you can call them protein hormones. They're hormones that are based on proteins, not fats, steroidals, like the anabolic steroids are. So long R3 IGF-1 is legitimate IGF-1 that they've added these side groups onto to make it less recognizable by the IGF-1 binding proteins in the bloodstream that inactivate it. So if the inactivation proteins can't recognize the IGF, it stays in the bloodstream and it functions better and longer. Okay, whereas if you use regular IGF-1, the one that your body would naturally produce, your body will inactivate it very quickly. So the INCRELEX brand is regular IGF-1. It's synthetically made like GH is. It's recombinantly made using bacteria that express the human IGF-1 gene. They isolate that and they give it to kids in very large dosages to help them grow better. Because let's face it, if you give kids a lot of GH, it can make them really insulin resistant. So they're finding that in a lot of these kids, they can just give them IGF-1 and it works even better. The problem is, once again, it probably needs to be administered, more frequently for bodybuilders. And remember, we're not trying to get the long bones to grow. They're not going to grow. And most people are using IGF-1. They're adults. They're not. Your long bones have stopped growing already. So you're trying to get muscle growth from this. So you got to understand. And like I said, I've never really compared or seen a study and when I was competing, the INCRELEX wasn't around. All I know is that the real long R3 IGF-1 worked really well on me, and I gained a lot of weight from it using small amounts. You have to microdose the stuff. If you take too much of it, it stops working right away. With INCRELEX, the dosage is higher, but you're probably better off maybe spreading it out a little bit more throughout the day, like in a couple shots, maybe 2 shots. The good thing is you probably won't stop responding to it as quickly because it's not in your bloodstream as long. Remember, the longer the stuff remains in the bloodstream, like long R3 is in there for up to 20 hours, the more chances your body have is at reducing IGF-1 receptors because your body is being flooded by this IGF-1. Whereas when you're taking the regular IGF-1 that doesn't last that long, you're probably not going to downgrade the receptors reaction very much because of the fact that it's not in the bloodstream. So unfortunately, both circumstances are not ideal because one, you're getting a long life of the IGF-1, but your body stops responding to it. So I have people do 4 weeks on, 2 weeks off cycles of it. Whereas in the other case, your body doesn't down-regulate as quickly, but it's not in your system long enough to really get exorbitant amounts of growth. So there's pluses and minuses on both sides.
Let's go to Kel1883. I'm 44 years old, been on gear since I was 22. I can't really see myself getting much bigger, but pretty happy to sit where I am. I find taking 250 mg of test, 220 mg of nandrolone every 16 days keeps me looking good and mentally feeling great. I seem to be able to keep a good standard of muscle this way. Do you think a guy should stay on this until, say, 65 and actually be healthy from it as the doses are so small?
If you told me you were taking testosterone like that, I'd say yeah. But, DECA is an anabolic steroid, meaning that it's not something naturally produced in the body. Yeah, it probably doesn't have any toxicity issues because it's long-acting. But it's not like a normal natural hormone that the body finds in there all the time. So I would probably cycle the DECA on and off. I would probably do my shots every week because every 2 weeks I know you're saying you feel good, but you're probably getting some ups and downs in blood levels. So I would just do the testosterone year round for as long as you want, as long as you're feeling good on it, at 200 milligrams a week or something like that, 1 to 200 milligrams. And then if every couple of months you want to throw in maybe 8 to 10 weeks of DECA with the test, I would do that. I don't know if I would run the DECA all the time with the testosterone. Hey, unless you want, it's up to you. And if your health markers are fine, your blood pressure is not elevated, you're not having any issues with cholesterol, profiles being screwed up, kidney function is good, then don't worry about it. But you know what? I just find that usually, testosterone is something that our bodies, naturally produce. And if you're trying to replace, that's what we call hormone replacement, you want to replace what your body really produces, not what it doesn't produce. So there's nothing wrong with running some DECA cycles in there at very low dosage, but I don't know if I would run them year round.
Let's go to Rehab Fix. What do you think is the most common injury amongst bodybuilders, and how could bodybuilders potentially prevent these injuries?
Probably, I hear the most about shoulders. Shoulder injuries seem to be the most prevalent, and that's because that joint, it's a multi-use joint. So there's a lot more movement in that joint, whereas your knees and your elbows are just kind of hinge joints, so they don't really have a lot of movement. Also, think about the amount of weight that we lift and put on that strain on our shoulder joints. If you don't have like perfect anatomical structure in there, you get a lot of rubbing and grinding, and ultimately, you wind up, your body's not meant to bench press 400 pounds, but we all, if you're at an elite level of bodybuilding, most people can do that. Problem is that you're getting a lot of cartilage damage in there, rotator cuff pulls, because let's face it, you can't always be on your game. You're going to be a little off. The weight's going to move a little bit or shift a little in the wrong direction. You're going to pull something here and there. And it's a cumulative thing. You're cumulatively doing damage over years and years and years. So even if you don't really hurt yourself, just like, acutely, like tear something, there's wear and tear injuries over the course of years. That's why you don't really see a lot of great bodybuilders into their 50s or 60s, Dexter being, like probably, an anomaly, and maybe Vince Taylor, because it's a cumulative injury type of thing over the years and years and years. You see a lot of guys getting shoulder replacements and stuff like that, even a few hip replacements. I would say the shoulder joint is the most vulnerable. And the only way to save it would be not to lift as heavy, but then you're not going to also put as much muscle on. So look, with any great, my father used to tell me is if you want to be a great athlete, there's sacrifices involved, and you have to be able to live with pain. If you're not willing to do that, you're not going to be a great athlete. And he was right. Some people would say it's not worth it because you got to deal with it later in life. I said it is worth it because I wanted to do something special and be different. So I was okay with pushing the envelope and accepting the consequences of it. Some people aren't. It's a personal decision. I can't make everyone else's decision for them. If you got to make your own decision, but do things smart. You don't want to be reckless about it, but understand that if you're going to push your body to that level and put that kind of muscle on and lift that kind of weight, there's going to be ramifications.
Let's go to T Bam Bam 62, and he says why, and about like 12 question marks after that. Why do so many people say calves don't matter in a physique today in the judging? Because they're hard to grow unless you're naturally gifted with the symmetry. And then he goes on to mention how the 90s with the likes of Flex Wheeler, Ronnie Coleman, Sean Ray, that they were complete and had calves. So in your opinion, first of all, do you think, calves are in a way are devalued in a sense? And if so, why?
I think in the men's open bodybuilding and probably classic, I think calves count. I mean, I've seen judges mark people down for lack of calves. Lonnie Teeper was always on Dennis Wolford having no calves. It's just not a major body part. So in the sense that, if everything else is great, I don't think people are going to lose a show because they don't have calves. Because let's face it, it's at the ground. You're not really looking that low. And that's really, it's what's your line of sight? Your line of sight is pecs, arms, abs from the front, obviously the back, you're seeing backs and you're seeing your back and glutes and hams. That's your line of sight. You don't really see calves. It's only when the guys are really close and then you're starting to compare body part for body part, that's when you start scrutinizing calves. So I think that's the reason. It's just because it's not visually in your visual field when you initially look at someone. I mean, if I'm just taking a quick look up on stage at someone, I'm just looking at their midsection. That's really what I'm seeing first. And I'm seeing, their pecs. If that looks good, I've already almost made an assessment whether I think that they're going to win. And I think that's just judging nature, especially when we have these shows with 1 million people in them. Judges make quick decisions. Very rarely do you have enough time to scrutinize everything, unless the guy has like one calf that's missing or something like that. As long as you have balance and if you have good legs, my calves were never my strong body part, although a lot of people said they loved, how my calves looked toward the end of my career, but they were a weak body part for me because I had high calves. Flex Wheeler had very high calves, and Sean Ray used to accuse him all the time of having calf implants. I don't think he did, but the point is that it didn't cost him any shows, so people would just pick out, hey, he has no calves because the guy was flawless every place else, and I think that's just the way it works. Obviously, for men's physique, they don't even judge the legs, so it doesn't matter if they have calves or not. But for classic and for open bodybuilding, I think it comes down to calves are only important when the contest is super close.
Another question that sort of, harkens back to the likes of Yates, Coleman, as also mentioned, Iain Valliere, is from Ivan to Bodybuilding. If somebody can easily endure the whole diet, cheat meal, refeed free, is that the best case scenario? You mentioned obviously many videos about the benefits of a cheat meal, but he's putting a scenario where you go completely without a cheat meal. How much fat loss benefits does the refeed daily actually have? And then again, comparing to bodybuilders that say they never cheated on their diets.
I think your metabolism slows down if you don't have a cheat meal. Although some guys and girls go overboard, and sometimes I have to design the cheat meal for them. I might make it a little cleaner. For some women, one of my clients, she was eating like 4 pieces of pizza for a cheat meal. And she was gaining weight every week just from that one meal. So I said, look, no more pizza. I said, that's a junk food meal. We're going to do some chicken. We're going to do rice, and I designed a cleaner cheat meal. It's still carbs in it because I think the carbs are important to stimulate metabolism. And she started losing weight again. It was just too many calories. I hate to use the word calories. I hate calories. But when you have too much energy you're putting into the system, your body just can't metabolize it all. You know, Dave Palumbo can eat a 5,000 calorie cheat meal, but Mrs. Jones, who's 120 pounds, she eats 5,000 calories and she's gaining weight from that, you know, and she's going to probably gain some fat from that. So cheat meals are not all equal. You know, a 300-pound guy, you know, cheat meal should be a lot bigger than a 30-pound woman's cheat meal. Unfortunately, a lot of times the couple goes out to eat together and the guy and the woman eat the same amount of food. The guy loses weight on Monday and the woman gains 7 pounds. So you can't just eat unlimited, you know. You have to. There has to be some degree of sanity to the cheat meal, you know.
Let's go to Banyanats. Ivan, what do you think about switching from KLEN to ephedrine when your body gets used to KLEN? And then I guess aside to that, which has more side effects?
Well, I mean, it's a silly question because, and I'll tell you why it's silly. Because it's not a silly question because I think a lot of people probably don't know the answer to it. It's silly to put one in place of the other because they both stimulate the same receptors. So you're not even giving the receptors a break. When you stop clenbuterol, which is a beta-2 agonist, you're then taking ephedrine, which is a beta-2 agonist. The truth is that clenbuterol is a better beta-2 agonist than ephedrine is because it's specific to beta-2 receptors, where ephedrine is much more of a central nervous system stimulant, and it affects the beta-1 receptors on the heart. So it's a generalized beta receptor, a stimulant. So you get more side effects from ephedrine because you get the rapid heart rate from it, which clenbuterol doesn't cause directly. Sometimes you can get an indirect effect from that because it drops your blood pressure too much, but it doesn't directly stimulate the heart, clenbuterol. So it's a much better beta agonist, and it's a much better fat burner. It really, I don't know. They're not sure if it's because of the beta-2 receptor stimulation or if it actually stimulates beta-3 receptors on fat cells too, and that's why it burns fat. But it's way better than ephedrine. So you can't use the two together because they compete against each other, and switching from one to the other to give one a rest is not going to do anything because they're also both, you know, activating the same receptors. The reason why a lot of people like ephedrine is because it's a stimulant, you know, and it makes them alert and it kills their appetite a little bit. If that's the case, just take caffeine for that effect and stay on clenbuterol. You don't want to use KLEN and ephedrine at the same time.
Let's go to Kyle Denny Shane now. This may come off as a bit of a homework assignment, but he is pretty detailed in the question. I'm 220 pounds, fairly lean year-round. How can I improve my efficiency in absorbing my carbs as muscle glycogen without spilling over? The most I can absorb without spilling over or getting watery is around 200 to 250 grams of carbs. I find that 30 grams of carbs per meal over 6 meals is fine. More than that, and I become instantly watery.
Well, he answered his own question. It's a trial and error process. How many grams of carbs does your body need? It's like asking how big is the gas tank in your car. If you have if one guy has a 15-gallon gas tank and another guy has a 20-gallon gas tank, the 20-gallon gas tank guy could eat more carbs, right? Also, which engine is bigger? If the 20-gallon tank has a bigger engine than the 15-gallon tank, he's going to burn gas faster, and he can hold even more gas in that tank because he's going to go through it quicker. So Danny had to figure out how many grams of carbs his body needs so that he doesn't spill, because any spillage of the glycogen storage, okay, because your glycogen stores are filled up, goes into fat storage, right? Well, he found 180 is the ideal amount for him. So that's what he eats. If he wants to try to gain weight, he goes a little over that maybe. But you don't want to go too much over it, because anything over that, you're going to start getting watery and you're going to start getting fatter. Anything under that, and you might actually, be too flat. You might not get maximum pumps in the gym. So through trial and error, we figure out how many grams of carbs you need, and then you just go just a little under that. And the great thing is that as you grow and produce more muscle tissue, you have more storage capacity. It's like you're expanding the gas tank in your car. You can hold more glycogen. So you'll notice that you can eat more food as you get bigger. And that's just something, once again, that's why having a coach is good, because sometimes guys just can't figure, or girls can't figure out for themselves how many they need and when to increase it. And that's why having another set of eyes looking over your pictures every week or twice a week, like I do with my clients, is good, because even though I don't have to tell them a lot of stuff, I can say, all right, we're going to increase carbs this week, or we're going to increase protein this week. And I know to do that because I can see they're getting more muscular, and their requirements now are increasing above what their requirements were when we first started the diet.
Time for 2-3 more questions. Let's go to JN Motive 8. Do you help any other WWE guys besides Triple H with their diet and nutrition? And I guess here's the, speculative one, which we could have some fun with. Of the ones that you may have helped, or the ones that you just kind of observed as an observer or a fan, Which WWE wrestler do you think has the best potential to be a bodybuilder?
Yeah, I've heard people ask me that before. I work with Triple H, obviously, with Stephanie, his wife. I did Stone Cold Steve Austin's diet for a little while. And I've worked with a couple of the guys that are upcoming wrestlers in the organization as well. Randy Orton buys all the Species nutrition supplements, especially Fiberlife. So I know Triple H has told a lot of people about the supplements. So a lot of them use the supplements and follow the bodybuilding kind of lifestyle, proponents that I put forth. So even though I might not work directly with them, I'm working indirectly with them through the supplements that they're buying that I'm creating. Having said that, who would be a good, John Cena had a great body, for body. The Rock has a great body, for bodybuilding as well. I think, so it just, you never even look at the Ultimate Warrior back in the day. He was crazy. He was a bodybuilder. He was a good bodybuilder too when he was competing. Ed Connors got him hooked up with the WWE, which was the WWF back then, and that's how he got into wrestling. And obviously he was a very popular wrestler and he stopped bodybuilding. But there was a lot of guys that could have been, really good. Triple H is a little tall for bodybuilding, so his leg development might have been a little tougher. But I thought Cena was great, physique-wise. Like I said, the Ultimate Warrior, in my mind, I'm probably forgetting a bunch of guys. The Rock is a little tall too, but, had a great upper body. Hogan could have been a good bodybuilder, if he ever gave 100% to that as well. Superstar Billy Graham was a great bodybuilder. There's that classic picture of Arnold and him together, that black and white that he uses his 8x10 that he sells. So I have that up in my studio. So there were a lot of good guys, but unfortunately, once they made it big in the WWE, they never really pursued bodybuilding beyond that. So we don't really know how far they could have gone. Probably the Ultimate Warrior probably could have had the best, the biggest, bodybuilding career, I think.
Let's go to classic physique Nash. Is there always a dip in sex drive after an average 8 to 12 week cycle, or do some guys bounce right back right away? And I guess I'll add to that. For those that do experience a dip, what would you recommend?
There's no way not to get a dip. If you're at 1,000 milligrams of testosterone, you're injecting a week, and your testosterone on blood work is like 3,000 total testosterone, and then you go off the cycle, even if your body went back to producing its own natural production at maximum value, which would be 800, you're still going to feel low. How could you not feel low going from 3,000 total testosterone to 800? And most guys are going from 3,000 down to 20 because their bodies just don't turn back on right away. Obviously, doing the right, post-cycle therapy, course, 2,000 units of HCG, every 2 or 3 days, for 2 or 3 weeks, and then doing some Clomid. I keep guys on Testalize the entire time that they're off to balance the DHT, estrogen, and testosterone levels. That helps a lot as well. But you have to understand you're not going to be at that super high value that you were when you're on a cycle. It's impossible. And even if you were at max natural levels, it still would feel too low for you because you're just taking away the sensitivity. You can't overstimulate those receptors like you were doing. Now, having said that, when I would go off cycle, my sex drive would not be as crazy as it was when I was on, but it never was to the point where I couldn't function. Because I think a lot of guys, it's psychological too. They're like, well, I feel different. And then they start thinking about it too much. And before you know it, they've talked themselves out of being able to have sex because there is a psychological component to it. And I understand when you're going from injecting, every other day, a whole bunch of stuff, and now you're not doing anything, you think that sex drive should drop. The funny thing is the first 3 or 4 weeks, you still have a lot in your system. So you shouldn't have a low sex drive at all for at least 3 or 4 weeks till you hit that month mark. Then you might have a little drop. And then usually guys don't only stay up for 8 weeks anyway. So, what are we talking about? We're talking about 4 weeks of being a little low. Come on. I think guys are crybabies about it, to be honest with you.
One last question is from Ojala Nico. You always get these questions, obviously, from your own competing career. Do you remember your exact cycle from the 1997 Nationals?
I do, actually. I was using, back in 97, you got to remember, there was no Trenbolone, okay? No one was making their own Trenbolone yet, really. Not that I knew of, at least. I was using, at that point, we were getting testosterone in bottles, 10cc bottles from Steris. That was the Steris connection. That was the United States. It came right from the pharmacy in the US. Greg Valentino talks about it all the time. So I was using like 250 milligrams, or 200 milligrams, maybe even 300 milligrams, like, 4 times a week or something like that, 3-4 times a week of that. I was using, I was getting Parabone, which was the Trenbolone we used back then. It was from France. They were in ampules. They were 76 milligrams per amp. We would use like 2 to 3. The last 3-4 weeks, I would use 3 of them. I thought I was a big shot, And we'd use that. We would use injectable, the Winstrol amps. They were little, they look like little milk bottles you'd shake up. We'd do 50 milligrams every other day of that. The last 2 weeks, I would do my Halo test in 20 milligrams. They were little green, little mints. They looked like they came right from a U.S. pharmacy. I was taking Humatrope at the time, which is an American growth hormone. I was using about 3 to 4 IUs a day for that show. And let me think if there's anything else I was taking. I think I was actually on a little bit of insulin too. I used to take some insulin because I was eating a lot of food, but not a lot. Like I was taking like 3 or 4 units in the morning, 3 or 4 units like 6 hours later or something like that with the GH. Because I would get very insulin resistant, and I didn't check my blood sugars back then because you couldn't just buy a cheap glucose monitor back then. I just knew when my blood sugars, I wasn't absorbing my food. I was really flat. So believe it or not, I did use insulin, very small amounts for that show. And I think it was just because, once again, I think I probably from the GH, I was running a little bit of high blood sugars. I wasn't absorbing my food. And once again, I have no data to support that other than how I felt. I used clenbuterol, not a ton of it, probably maybe 20 micrograms, 3 or 4 times a day. And I was on probably about 50 micrograms of Cytomel. I liked it. I didn't really need the T3, but I felt that it made everything work better. Like the GH and the clenbuterol work better. And that's why I used it rather than for fat burning purposes. I would use that. And I'm trying to think if there was anything else that I was using at that point, like anything exotic that I had access to. I really wasn't a big orals person, so I wasn't using any orals. I think that's it. I think I had Primabol and acetate tabs. They were 25 milligrams a piece. They came from Germany. And I think I was doing 4 of those a day the last 6 weeks because they only lasted 2 or 3 hours in the system. So I would do 25 milligrams every 3 hours during the day, which came out to about 3 or 4 pills a day. And I really liked those. I felt good on those. They're the only oral that has no toxicity because they're acetate. They're not 17 alpha alkylated. So I felt comfortable using those, that I wasn't toxifying my body. And they didn't make me feel bad. A lot of orals I didn't do well on orals. They would just make me feel like I didn't want to eat or anything like that. That was the cycle. But you know what? You got to remember, all the stuff came from either European or American pharmacy. It was all 100% legitimate and good. And you didn't have to do excessive amounts. And you know what? Quite frankly, if I would have told people what I was taking back then, they would have said that was excessive. They thought that I was an extremist doing those dosages. I just knew that was the effective dosages that worked. And once again, because guys had a lot of different theories about how much you should take back then. I never thought to take 8 or 10 or 12 IUs of GH. No one did that. I didn't think to take 2,000 milligrams of testosterone. No one did that. I didn't think to take 5 vials of Parabone. No one thought to do that. If you took 3, that was you only did that the last couple of weeks, So that was like a top level cycle then. And I think a lot of the pros were doing similar type stuff like that. No one really pushed the envelope back then. It was all about training and diet. And that's the truth of the matter,
That is some photographic memory that you have there. Something that
I wish I could remember what I did today, yesterday, that well.
That's incredible. That's incredible. I'm trying to do the math in my head. How many years ago was that? We were talking about something that happened literally
25 years. You know what I was so immersed in that culture, and it was so important to me, and I was such a scientist about what I did that I remember it like it was yesterday. I can see the vials in my brain, what drawer I kept them in my house, and when I would do the shots and everything like that. I just knew because I wrote everything down, the cycle. I knew exactly what I was taking, and because it was so important for me not to leave any stone unturned, And I feel bad for the guys today because now everything's underground. You don't know, we sell a lot of Roy test kits on DavePalumbo.com, especially now with the quantitative ones that will tell you for Trenbolone, enanthate for test, enanthate test sip, and Deca how much is actually in the vials. And I can't tell you, 50% of the anabolics are probably test propionate. Every single drug, injectable, and all the orals are coming back as dianabol. So, and that's if they're real. A lot of the stuff is nothing. So you can't trust anything. That's terrible. It's a terrible feeling to not know what you're taking and if it's good, because you want to maximize your performance. And here these guys are having to guess. So now, at least with the Roy test, you can tell if you have real gear. And now for a few of the compounds, you could actually tell how much gear you're taking or your stuff has in it, which is a huge advantage. And so I advise, and once again, you can see this as a sales promotion if you want, but it's really helping you guys out. And that's why I'm doing it too. You're crazy if you don't test your gear, because you know what? Why would you want to waste your time and money? You know, it's a simple test. It's like $20 a test. Once you test your stuff, you know it's good. You buy a bunch of the good stuff. If you know your stuff is bad, you get rid of the bad stuff. That's how it works.
That's going to do for this episode of Ask Dave right now on RxMuscle.com. And of course, the RX Muscle YouTube channel. All new episodes of Heavy Muscle Radio and the After Hours podcast. Tomorrow, all new episode of Iron Rage with Dave and Lee Priest. For Dave Palumbo, I'm Sadiq Faruqi. We'll see you next time.